All right, good afternoon. Hey, that's me. Hey, look there. It is very good to be here with you today, but before we dive in, just want to kind of set up kind of what I'm talking about emotionally in a moment that might feel familiar to quite a few of you. Not a theory, not really a framework, more of a human moment. And I want you to think about if you've been in an environment, classroom, situation, faculty meeting, where you knew you were capable, but something just wasn't working. And your ability to communicate that was also just not working. If this has been true for you, you are amongst your kind because, right? This wasn't because you didn't care, and it wasn't because you weren't trying. As we've heard from many people today, it's about the environment, right? We know that the world was not built for us. And that is kind of where we're starting today, with that thought in mind. And that's really been our framework all day. I'll go back here real quick. I like to start with this polished image because this is the image, especially in academia, that we expect. This is the deferential colleague. However, as Mike presented earlier, this is usually what people get. This is what my brain does when you tell me to smile. It does the exact opposite. And you'll see that all the way back to kindergarten graduation, that was the case. That is a family trip to Disney last year and the one before that. But to give you kind of a sense of my work, I gotta give you a sense about me because I'm a humanities professor. I deal with humans. I am late diagnosed, but if you are diagnosed after 7, you are late diagnosed. I am autistic. I'm a proud 25-year Verizon customer, so I don't tell people I'm on the spectrum. I proudly announce that I'm autistic and ADHD. And like Mike was discussing, his kind of drive in academia largely came from wanting to understand the other. And for me, the other was every other human, the normal things, the rules that everyone said, then didn't follow, and then looked at me like I was crazy because I said, but I thought there was a rule. And thus I get to my professional experience. I have served as department chair. I was a co-PI on the Mellon Transfer Bridges to the Humanities grant between Henry Ford College and University of Michigan. And I was the honors director. I worked closely with Michelle at Europe and a whole bunch of other people. Angela, the vice provost, was on the grant when I first took it over. And those roles largely ended after and because of my disclosure of autism. I asked for rules as to why we couldn't pay students the stipend for the grant that we had just received. And they said, what is a stipend? And I lost my mind. How can we be in higher education and you ask me that question the day after you cash the check? If you'll notice, we're no longer partners with you on that grant. I stepped down largely because of this. My work now focuses on neurodiversity, burnout, disability inclusion, equitable design. I hold certifications in user experience, universal design for learning. I serve on state boards, national boards. I actually will be leaving here to go up to Lansing. We have Voices in Action tomorrow. Will we be petitioning? I see Zach here. Will we be petitioning our legislators and state senators? And I also founded a nonprofit with the same name as the class I teach, Humanities 101. They said, you're just a humanities teacher. And I said, okay, I'm just a humanities teacher. But I'm also going to be traveling to Uzbekistan in fall as a Fulbright specialist lecturing on American culture and disability inclusion. So who gets the last laugh? But my key point is, none of this began with theory. It began with lived experience. It began navigating systems that did not know how to navigate me. And once I understood that, everything changed. We know that neurodivergence is a natural variation. Brains are not standardized. We see these differences in processing, attention, sensory experience, and communication. And this is not rare. On the books, research says 15 to 20% of the population is neurodivergent. But if you've been listening today, you know that that's probably a much higher number. But fear, institutions, and red tape often keep that from being fully realized, which means all of us here are working, living, possibly loving neurodivergent people every day. And they're not somewhere else, they're already here, and here is now. So I want you to take a moment, and again, in a room like this, it's very easy, but look around in this room, and this is where the shift begins. Often I'm sitting in a room with bank executives or public officials who want to check off their list of extra classes for the year. But this is where the shift begins. And we need to move from the idea of deficit to this idea of mismatch between the person and the process. What we often label as struggle is not coming from the person alone. It's emerging from the interaction between that person and their environment. The same brain can have completely different outcomes based upon the environments they're put in. Because as we know, just as the platypus, the world is not built for everyone, everywhere. This little guy got me kicked out of science class in 7th grade more often than not. Whenever there was a scientific rule, I'd say, well, what about those rules about mammals? What about that platypus? And I remember sitting in a world religion class once teaching the Trinity, and I used that old metaphor of liquid, solid, gas, and a student said, well, what about plasma? And I was like, yes, that's the kind of thinking, right? Because neuroaffirming, and this is what I'm all about, recognizes those differences as valid, recognizes the brain that says, what about plasma, as valid, and then designs environments where people can succeed as they are. We move from fixing to supporting, from ideas of compliance to understanding. And instead of asking, why can they not, we ask, what might help? And that's a framework shift. And it leads to a completely different question, and that completely different question, as we know, as researchers, leads to completely different answers. As has been stated many times before in this room already, behavior is communication. It is not defiance, and it's not always an act of will. Again, when someone in higher education says, what is a stipend? I don't have control over what comes out of my mouth when I say, you don't know what a stipend? Again, I had very little control. Overwhelm is not laziness. Shut down is not disengagement. Sensory response is not overreaction. I want you to think about a time where you had difficulty in a classroom or a workplace, or when someone else had difficulty in that classroom or workplace. And think about the pain that you were communicating. Think about the distress that you were communicating. More than likely, it had nothing to do with the moment you were in, and had everything to do with something else. When we change the way that we see these issues, we can change the meaning. And when we change the meaning, we can change our response. And universal design is that mindset. We've been talking about this all day. And I will tell you, I have gone out and been told, if you get the money, we will let you do it. You get the money and they still look at you and go, why would you want to design for everyone, right? We are compliant. We are ADA compliant. That's all we need to do. And universal design pushes us to think differently. It means that we build systems that expect variation rather than react to variation. And the principles are fairly simple. These 3 principles of engagement, offering multiple ways to participate, representation, offering multiple ways to access content, and expression, offering multiple ways to respond. In my classes, my students can access my class myriad ways. YouTube, podcasts, the learning management system from the school, but that's a horrible way to access the class because they can access it from their cell phone every other place. They can turn in their projects the exact same way because they also don't turn in their projects with me. They grant me access to their files, which I inform them also revoke immediately when the semester is over. So I want you to think about moments where you already are flexible, where you've already thought about other people in the design, because chances are we're already doing more than we think. But as we learn when you are studying this design, even the best systems cannot anticipate every moment, every person, every brain, every body, and every budget. And that's where micro accommodations come in. I'm a PR guy by nature, and I had to repackage it. Those of us in education know that they bring back the same theories every 20 years. They just slap a new name on it. They bring up they do new studies. I mean, all the evidence is there, but it's usually just the same old theories repackaged. And micro accommodation does the same thing with universal design, makes it a little bit more palatable. Because it's not just ramps and technology. It's about connection, clear communication, and small interactions that really make the difference. It's what I call Gandalfian. If you are a Lord of the Rings fan, you know that Gandalf pushes the idea of small, everyday acts that keep the darkness at bay. Micro accommodations are these small, everyday acts, flexible adjustments. They reduce friction without requiring formal process or disclosure, and they happen in real time. And they were honestly inspired by a hotel that I stayed at next to the Cleveland airport, in between the train tracks and the Cleveland airport runway, with a jar of earplugs sitting out, and said, please take one. Even if you think you don't need it, take one. And it explained, we are in between the airport and a loading dock, and it is loud, and we can get you another. And of course, doing what I do, I called, who did this? Bring the person to me. Like, I am so excited, right? I can't communicate it. And the manager comes out and she told me, we got complaints. We put a sign out and said, we have earplugs, we got complaints. So now we just say, take these to your room, throw them away if you don't need them, use them, leave them on the desk, whatever, but you're probably gonna need them. Our Yelp reviews are through the roof because we're putting out 3-cent earplugs, showing our customers we care about your night here. Small, itty bitty gesture, but when I walked in, I immediately felt that someone in this weird corporate hotel cared about my sleep. Something very important. Those of you who travel for work, you know. So this is about adjusting pace. This is about clarifying not just what we tell others, clarity is kindness, but also what we tell ourselves. Rephrasing, offering other options. And I always talk about low or no tech kind of fixes. And if we think about this, there are lots of these low or no tech fixes that we have been used to. A lot of people in my business, I talk to parents, community organizations, and they'll say, well, autism didn't exist in my day, right? Now, I'm from Appalachia. Autism didn't exist in my day in Appalachia either in the 80s. However, Grandpa, who was on the porch swing every night from 4 to 6, with his toothpick in his mouth and his coin in his finger, except for Thursdays, because he got the same haircut from Betty at the barber shop on Thursdays. Then he and Grandma went for meatloaf. It had to be meatloaf on Thursdays because if Betty wasn't there, maybe it wasn't meatloaf, maybe it was chicken, but only if Betty wasn't there. But yeah, Grandpa wasn't autistic at all. 100%, 100%. But you had to get the shirts with the elastic on the bottom, but not on the sleeve. Remember, no elastic on the sleeve, but elastic on the bottom. They only sell them at JCPenney. Yes, Grandpa was totally normal. And that's really what micro-accommodation was. I grew up in Appalachia. I was micro-accommodated all the time. Weird is okay as long as you're our weird, right? If you're too weird, we have a back porch, right? So micro-accommodations, some of the ones that my wife and my daughter and I have come up with are things like this. And these are not ours. We've just adapted them for use. And I've got these. If you're interested, you can come over during the break. But I have these in postcard form. One's for everyday kind of interactions, can be used in stickers, the non-speaking communication aid, and the other's used for teachers. And universal design, again, if you think about a middle school classroom, and you think about even students who do not, sorry, sound guys, keep whacking the microphone, even people who can communicate this to the teacher, you think about the social anxiety and pressure of in 7th grade science class saying, I don't understand mitosis again, can you explain that to me? But setting my pencil on 1, and the teacher walking by and seeing that and going, well, you know what mitosis is, right? right? That is the difference between me staying engaged and me running away. And we'll talk about what engagement brings, because engagement is what it's all about. And so to put micro accommodation in practice, and because again, how do I make this real? How do I work now? Because as an autistic person, as a parent of an autistic person, I need something that's going to help now. I don't need a book that I can buy tomorrow. I don't need a 4-step process that my autistic brain, the minute that the steps don't work and the rules break, I'm gonna go, well, that doesn't work. Throw that baby out with the bathwater. I'm gonna go hyper-focus on the next answer, right? So PB&J was what I came up with for my own brain. And then it started to translate out. Because when you start to make these small adjustments, these micro accommodations, they start to happen in real time, you see that pattern. And the thing that you need is predictability, balance, and joy. And it is as deceptively simple as making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. However, you know, if I make a PB&J sandwich and you make a PB&J sandwich, there's a difference in the way they taste. Grandma said that was love. I think she might be right, but there definitely is some human magic there, right? And that is what I want to get kind of expressed with this idea, because this isn't a step-by-step process. This isn't a program. It's a relational ethic. It is much like my work in religion or in humanities and in kind of human history. Actions, words, thoughts, actions, words, thoughts. Those kind of triad relational things, right? When one doesn't work, the other does, all right? And so predictability creates the idea of safety. Safety allows for balance, and balance makes space for joy. And that is really what a lot of the autistic community has been talking about this year. Where do we find joy? What does it look like? Who gets to gatekeep it, all right? But beyond all of these things, predictability shows respect, right? Balance shows care, and joy shows connection. It's not just a strategy, it's how we show up for ourselves and how we show up for others. So what is the PB&J? Well, predictability. Like the peanut butter, it's slow, it's bulky at times, but it is sustaining. It's not about controlling people. It's about reducing the need to constantly scan for what might happen next. My brain is waiting for the next saber-toothed tiger to come jumping out of that hallway and come chasing for us. It is always prepared for that. I didn't choose that brain, it chose me. All right, but being able to name it and understand it, that helps me predict what it might do next. Predictability is clear expectations. It's consistent processes and transparent communication. Something as simple as the signage to get here. That is predictability. Knowing that when I walked in the building, even though I was greeted by a human who told me where to go, I also had signs directing me the whole way. I felt safe, even though I'd only been engaged very briefly, right, at the front door. I didn't walk in like I do even into some stores and wonder, where am I going? What am I doing? The sign says there, and I walk over there, and that's not what it's supposed to be, right? My brain then starts to send signals. This is a trap. You know, I hear Admiral Akbar screaming, it's a trap, it's a trap. And so if we eliminate some of those fears, which are going to be there whether they're there or not, because with autism, it's a perception of fear. It's not the actual presence of danger all the time. Predictability creates that safety. It creates places for pause, places for my brain to process, and then later, places for me to participate. Because when things are understandable, people can show up, not because everything is easy, but because it's clear. And when things are clear, right, they will be calm, at least in my book. You know, it's that idea of as slow as, fast as steady, or steady as, oh my gosh, my dad's gonna, there you go, slow as smooth, smooth as fast. My dad is shouting down from up high and going, I shouted that at you. So the idea of the 4 Ps is where I set this, because this is predictability in practice. We share schedules, we set reminders, we reduce unnecessary surprises, we make expectations visible and not implied. As an instructor, as a professor all the time, I admit fault openly and freely now. I tell students I'm taking a personal day for my own mental health. You should do the same. This is the main reason why I don't allow them to turn in files anymore. Because as a graduate student, I wrote many a mentor's chapter for their book and then got an acknowledgement in the credits. Not co-writing, an acknowledgement. And that's just how the game was played. I was autistic. I said, okay, that's how the game is played. It's not how the game is played. It might be how the academic game is played, but that's not how the world plays a game. You want to play the academic game, that's fine. I don't present at academic conferences anymore. I don't pay to play for exposure. That's, I did that for 25 years. I started to realize maybe I'm being gaslit. At the AIDD conference last year, I thought, when somebody walked up to my academic presentation and asked me, what's your business model? And I said, oh, that's what this is. Okay, nope. All right, which is why I'm here today, right? Because this is something different. Because we're shifting the paradigm, and that's what it's about, shifting the paradigm. But we know the world is not predictable, right? There you go. The world is not predictable. Life is going to happen. It's going to hit the fan. And this is where balance comes in. And it's something that I definitely think, as a cultural historian, it's something that we have to reckon with in the West, but understanding that it's not a binary. It's not either or. It can be both and, right? We can be both a good person and dysregulated, right? I can be both autistic and not a genius, or not nonverbal, right? There are more than just those two binaries. And just like predictability, we have to be clear about what it is and what it isn't, okay? It's not lowering expectations. It's aligning demands with human capacity, and that's the difference. Because when we design for predictability, that idea of life happens, right? And then we have this support. It allows for participation to be sustainable. Because again, if you give me a rule, my brain locks in that rule, and then all of a sudden, you just throw that rule out and you say, okay, we're gonna write another rule. If you don't explain to me maybe why you bridge that gap for me, I'm gonna disengage completely. I'm honestly going to see it as hostile towards me because I don't trust you now. You lied. It's worse than lie. Now you're a deceiver. I'm from Appalachia, right? Grandma always say that, the devil. Now, the idea of balance, though, is staying engaged rather than just burning out. It does require some, and again, a framework shift. And some of that framework is in power, not just within our relationships with other people, but also within ourselves. We hear this a lot of discussion today about, should I take the accommodation? The stigma that goes with that. We were discussing at lunch, I mentioned that Mike had mentioned that he's fine with whatever comes. And I remember a friend of mine at Rutgers in disability studies that said, are you sure you want to disclose at work? And I said, yeah, I know what's coming. And she said, are you sure? And I said, oh, I know. And she had disclosed in a disability studies program in a disability studies department. And she was like, oh, you have no clue. And after the grant was gone, I was no longer the honors director, all of these other things, I thought, oh my gosh, you were right. Little did I know that I was just visiting the club, right? So we can build a different club, right? And that is through a power differential. We have a problem, most neurodivergent people have a problem with just the facade of power without any kind of true care behind it. So we can't also perpetuate those systems. Thinking about bonds, breaks, boundaries, and barrier removals. These are the 4 Bs, right? These are what help keep it sustainable. We build shared agreements. We create built-in pauses, set clear limits, and reduce friction ahead of time. I sometimes overshare what we're doing with my students. Here's the project, here's what we're doing, here's what you need to do to turn it in. And I did that largely because I hate answering the same question 40 times, because I get angry the 40th time, right? And that student is just asking it for the first time. And I blew up. So I wanted to make it sustainable for me, not draining for me. So giving over some of that responsibility to them and allowing that to be shared. What should we do? Do you want to do a paper? My favorite was when I gave them power over whether to turn it in before spring break or after spring break. And they chose very unwisely. They said, oh, after spring break. And I said, now that means I go on spring break. I will see you Monday morning. I will not answer emails until Monday morning, right? It said, choose wisely, and they did not choose wisely, right? So now if we think about making it sustainable, making participation sustainable and not draining, what it allows for then is more than just a peanut butter sandwich. It allows for that jelly, that joy that creates connection, and that connection that creates belonging, the thing that we've been talking about all day here. Joy is more than just a moment of happiness. It is that predictable safety. It's that sustainable balance. It's the sense of meaning that comes from being present, being valued, and being connected. And I know this because I was distracted for 10 years of my life, dissociated for 10 years of my life. And my therapist proved this to me when she said, yeah, you went to Disney? Yes, I did go to Disney. She said, did you really like the food? Yes, I did. What was your favorite meal that you ate? And I went, she's like, you can't remember a single thing that you put in your mouth that entire trip, can you? And I was like, I know I had a Mickey bar. She's like, that's cheating. That's cheating. I was like, Dole Whip. She's like, nope, cheating too. I had no clue. I dissociated the whole time, right? I was there. I enjoyed myself. Everyone has pictures of me smiling. I have no memory of it. Was I truly enjoying the moment, right? And just as we heard from the provost, we need to honor effort, not just outcome. Right? I got so excited when I heard that. I thought, oh yes, right? Because acknowledging the process, not just the outcome, humanizes the moment. And why are we here? But to make humans possibly, I think, better, or create space that's more authentic. These aren't small things. They're places that make spaces sticky in a good way, right? Using some bad metaphor. So the 4 J's. Join, journey, just be, and jubilee. If those are the ways to remember this, the idea of joining is more about than just being present in a room. It's about being with the people in that room. Because we feel the difference if you're in a room and you're distracted. I know if I were to pick up my phone, right, in the middle of talking with you, you would feel that room shift. The journey is about reflection. If we never pause to notice growth, if we never take notice of those small things, we feel like nothing is changing. And when nothing feels like it's changing, we disengage. Just being is authenticity. And as you can see, I'm all about authenticity. I played by other people's rules, got to the top, and it still didn't matter. I disclosed, and I had people saying, oh, it's so nice that you know these words. How do you know these words? Colleagues that I'd worked with for 20 years when I then disclosed, and we've not talked this power differential, but it happens with 19-year-olds in my classroom in April, every winter semester when I say Happy Autism Awareness Month, your professor's autistic. I'll have students raise their hands and say, how did you drive here today? Wait, they let you have a car? Wait a minute. I had one student who said he wanted a refund. Yeah. He was a joy the remainder of the semester when he learned that it was past drop date. And Jubilee is about celebration, because I did celebrate that it was past drop date. It's not just outcomes, but it's also effort. It's not just big wins, but those small moments. If we only celebrate the finish line, we will lose people along the way. Remember the original marathon and what happened to that guy and who came along and said, yeah, let's run another, right? These are not big, complicated interventions. They're small, intentional choices, but together they're what turns connection into belonging, and belonging is what makes people stay. So finally, let's bring it all together. We design for people, not performance. Celebrating the journey, not just the destination. Predictability creates safety, balance sustains capacity, and joy creates connection. When all three of these are working together, people don't just get through the experience. They engage, they contribute, they stay. You don't need perfect systems, right? You need small human moments, moments of clarity, moments of flexibility, moments of connection. And so when something is not working, ask yourself, is this a predictability issue? Is it a balance issue? Is it an issue of joy? Because when we change how we show up, we change what is possible inside of the room itself. It's not theoretical, it's design, it's practical, and it is impact. And if you remember nothing else, remember this. You can't help someone in overwhelm or dysregulation, but you can make them a snack. And sometimes that's where everything begins. Are there questions? Yes, yeah, I think there's a break after this, and I've got some postcards, and I'll make sure you get them. Just come on over here to the pillar here in the middle of the room. I'm hiding behind it. Questions? Oh, yeah, there you go.
Did you have a question?
Yes.
Here you go.
May we have access to the slide deck?
Yes. Again, if you want to reach out to me, I don't know if it's going to be put on the conference site or whatever, but if you want to send me an email, I will happily send you the slide deck. Yes. And if again, it's April, and if we are colleagues here. One of the reasons why I got in trouble was because I wanted to honestly answer a question to one of my colleagues on the grant here. And when I said, well, I'll just send them an email and say that since I disclosed my autism, you have taken away any of my abilities to see the reporting software. And they said, if you send that, we'll put you in on this, And I said, well, that's the same rule. I said, I can't follow the rule and break the rule at the same time. And so I am all about sharing the information with colleagues and being collegial, because that's what lost me my job, was being collegial. So I'm gonna lean into it. It is open source, it is free. One of the other reasons why a lot of my universal design, my classes are all on YouTube. But I have taught for 25 years and never had students treat me like a TV star, but they walk around the hallway and they go, I'm gonna turn in my homework, can't wait to get my feedback. And I'm like, well, who are you, what? I taught writing for 20 years and never got that in writing classes. So happily send you the slide deck, and you can feel free to steal away. Use it as you feel knit. Yes.
Hi there. Oh, well, that's loud. Thank you for this. I really like this framework. It's really helpful for me. I'm wondering if you could say more about it sounds like preemptive accommodations and like micro accommodations you provide to students, what those can look like in practice. I know you mentioned sharing drafts, and that also seems like a data privacy thing rather than turning in files, but yeah, what other innovations have you used? I'm
big on, and I know that this is probably because I'm a little later in my career and I maybe get paid, but I feed students. That's the other thing. The simple micro accommodation of having some granola bars, and that they know, and this is not mine, this was my economics professor from Ohio University, who walked in every day and played Rolling Stones, the Beatles, dumped out a JanSport full of little candy bars, and put out 2 boxes of tissues every day. And lucky, when I was the honors director, I called him and I said, I contacted him and said, thank you, I'm feeding my students now and you're the inspiration. He said, you're feeding them from where? And I said, Henry Ford College. And he said, that's where I graduated from. And I'm like, no, you didn't. And he, and it was just one of those things that it was the reason why I went to that class. It was the reason why, I'm not an economics major. I ended up not being a business major after that, but I remembered him. And I was not a good freshman. I was not, that was one of the only classes I went to because I knew I could get a 3 Musketeers and a tissue. Like, and I could watch my weird professor sing the song. So I think feeding, obviously, engaging them in their space and on their way. I have also, one of the other ways that I do, I have online communication. They have access to socials. Now they're curated socials. They're not my completely free, open personal socials, but they're curated. I have tutored about Hamlet over Xbox Live while playing Call of Duty with students, poorly playing with them. But I'm in the room with them just simply to engage and have some fun. And so, yeah, it's tiring at times, which is also why, like I said, the balance for self, because then I don't feel badly about telling students, I don't check email on the weekend. I don't check it here. I am leaving, I am going here, and for 72 hours, you will not, because even if we have class rules, even if there are university rules on how long it takes, they do expect when they send that email at midnight, why haven't you responded at 3 o'clock in the morning? Why haven't you responded at 5? When you wake up to the 7 emails because they've been up all night and they don't understand how. So it's interesting the grace they give me as opposed to my colleagues, because they're like, oh yeah, doc, you take the time. You give us time, we'll give you time. It's amazing that how we treat each other mutually respectfully. It's kind of crazy. Other questions? Yeah.
Hi, great to have you here. I love your passionate words. I love the way you're speaking. I come from the Department of Linguistics, so, power of language. I want to ask you, it's kind of selfish actually, I just kind of want to hear, more of that impassioned speech. What would you change about academic conferences?
Oh, geez. Well, I mean, I did, and one of the reasons why I'm here is because we put on a conference at University of Michigan Dearborn. My own school would not host me. They wanted to charge me. They said, that's a you thing, not an us thing. And I'm like, it's former students from the school that are at University of Michigan Medicine right now. And so we hosted a conference there, and even that, I've got a laundry list of things I did incorrectly. But one of the things is access, the amount of money that it costs. And I know the amount of money it costs to put these things on. But I also know that there are creative ways to make that happen. If I can charge people $5 a head and pay the wonderful people at Picasso to feed everybody at University of Michigan Dearborn, then I know with name recognition like U of M, Ann Arbor, that can happen. If the weirdo professor from Henry Ford can raise money, 10 grand to make it happen at U of MD. And so I think access, bare minimum, presenters shouldn't have to pay. Bare minimum, right? A lot of graduate students who are cutting their teeth, bare minimum, they should get free attendance. The schedules are relentless. The networking is designed to be just like, in our world, MLA, where it is literally a war of attrition and it is designed to break you. And that is silly. Because as I tell my students all the time when I used to run the honors program, and they would be like, can I go to the bathroom? They raise their hand because they're coming from high school. And I'm like, listen, the only job that's ever going to make you ignore your body like that is if you're gonna be a nurse or a teacher. Are you gonna be a nurse or a teacher? And they'd be like, no, I'd be like, then go to the bathroom, right? Get up and go whenever your body needs to, right? Because we in academia, we're bells, whistles, hours, schedules. I used to lock the door 5 minutes after class started. No student was entered because that was the way I was taught. You can hear me from the hallway, right? That was what I was taught. And I have colleagues that are like, who are you? What happened? Did you get, hit in the head, whatever? But it was the fact that I looked at the neuroscience. When you look at the evidence and you're like, oh, right? I don't know how you can be a person of evidence and look at that and not follow it. So I would say that academics should possibly look at the academic research,
Thank you.
So, yeah. No meeting over an hour, and then they start the 3-hour meeting with that, right? Yes.
Hey, thank you, Adam. Just want to say it's always a pleasure to hear you speak.
Thank you, Zach.
Absolutely. I just wanted to say too, you bring up very great points in all of this, and more importantly, I think you're a great example of how accommodation and accessibility is an example of a powerful business strategy. And I think when we argue that point to anyone in academia, it's hard for them to refute. And so it's more of a comment. I just want to thank you, and I want to encourage you to continue fighting the good fight. Thank you.
No, I always like to make sure that I point out that it was alternate education. It was alternative education. I was in the create your own major program in the 90s at Ohio University. Like I got back from Africa, I taught in Ghana, and I get back and I say, nothing fits, nothing works. And they're like, well, here's this, you can create your own major thing. And I'm like, okay. The only traditional program I did was a Master's of Literature at Eastern, right? And that was a generalist degree. Everything else has been non-traditional. So finding those avenues and having mentors who said, no, you're not gonna settle, go look for a weird program. Like I almost went to a program where David Lynch was the teacher, like, you know, in Switzerland kind of thing. But it was, if you are a round peg, then find a round hole. Don't jam yourself into that square peg, or that square hole, sorry. I'm a round peg. Sorry, another question.
Hey, great stuff. I'm going to ask kind of a different question. Gandalf has waved his staff and given you the magical powers to create any business model in the world to help anybody who's neurodiverse. What do you create?
Business model in the world? I don't know. This is just completely, I don't know. I'm about half the size that I used to be, right? You know, again, sensory, so the sensory clothes for bigger people, like why the hell did tech fabric exist for me when I was 500 pounds? Like I walk around in just like these silky, lovely clothes now, and I'm just like, why didn't this exist? So I think that there's gotta be a huge market there. I mean, we're America, but I honestly don't know. I'm gonna be thinking about that one, but I know that there's money. I talk to the people all the time and we see the money that neurodivergent folks spend. And I know the amount of economic augmentation I personally use to make my life functional, right? All of my digital Jeeves and digital butlers, right? Other questions? All right. Well, thank you so much. Thank you.